I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Teresa Ting, to take the floor. And there you are. I'm beginning her presentation. Before that, I would like to say just a few notes about Teresa. Teresa is a tenured researcher at the University of Calabria in Italy, in the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Technologies. She holds a PhD in neurobiology from Kent State University in the USA, where she studied the learning and the memory processes in rat brain models and taught functional human neuroanatomy to medical students. After moving to Italy, she began teaching English and earned an MA in TEFL from the University of East Anglia in the UK. Her current research focuses on applying insights from cognitive neuroscience to the design of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics learning materials, often tested through classroom-based studies. Her work on developing educational materials for diverse learning environments is well known in our community, academic community. Her CLIL science materials for upper secondary students won the 2013 Yelton's Award for Innovative Writing, and in 2022, a STEM resource for lower secondary students was recognized alongside materials from the BBC and National Geographic. She has also written educational content for Cambridge University Press. She's actively involved in teacher training programs across Europe, supporting CLIL, EFL, and subject-based instruction. Her work on creating learning materials for a range of classroom contexts is well known and respected, very much respected in our academic community, and she continues to inspire both teachers and researchers. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Teresa Ting.
Before we start, I would like everybody to get up, and look at this. There are 4 experimental stations. 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? So I would like you two to be in charge of these 2 M&Ms, and you two to be in charge of these 2 M&Ms. But please, everybody get up and go close to a station, and please follow my instructions. Do not touch the M&Ms until I tell you to, okay? And don't move the plates. Don't do anything until I tell you. Okay, so everybody please get near a station so you can see the situation. Okay? Okay, so can everybody see a station? Okay. Now, the plate closer to us in the front has sugar water. I put like half a kilo of sugar in a bottle of water, and I shook it all night, and that is the plate in the front. The plate in the back is normal water. If you want, you can take your photos and be ready to take photos of these plates. So the 2 people responsible for the M&Ms, take them, 1 each, and you put 1 in each plate. 1 M&M in 1 plate, and the other M&M in the other plate. Ready? 2 people with M&M. Wait, put, not drop, gently put. Somebody have, not yet. Have you put? No. Have you, okay. Ready? Okay, put it in the plates, 1 in each plate. Look at the M&Ms. 1 in each plate. 1 in each plate. Take a look, and while we set up the okay, take a look. Okay. Okay, see things? Anything interesting? Okay, take a look. Take a look. Okay, anything happening over there? Are they okay? You guys can peek at the other ones if you want. You can take a look at the other ones if you want. Can you hear me on the? Yes, you can. Okay, what's happening? Okay, you see? Okay, now here is a good experiment right here. I mean, it should be the same. Take a look. Okay, so the one in the front is sugar water, and the one in the back, okay? Okay, now, I'm gonna stay there, don't move. Hello, okay. Don't move, stay there, don't move, just very quickly, so we don't move, we'll keep looking. I'm Teresa, and thank you very much to Yolanda for having invited me. Here, okay, so just very quickly, I think we can skip this part. I have my PhD in biology. I studied biology, etc. I got my PhD in neurobiology. I studied rats and hamsters in vivo and in vitro, chronically implanted electrodes in brains, and studied motivation, which we'll talk a little bit about, and studied brain slices, okay? And then back then, I was teaching at the medical school. And so and we did dissections of the human brain, etc., etc. Because back then, there were no MRIs, okay? Now, there are MRIs. If you suspect anything, you put yourself in the MRI. I put my son in twice, okay? And but back then, there were no MRIs, so you had to dissect people. You had to analyze people. you had to look at how they walk, look at how they talk, look at how they respond, and think, maybe the tumor is here, maybe the tumor is there. And hopefully when the surgeon goes in, the tumor is where you think it is, okay? So that was what we did. Whoops, sorry about that. So now then, pardon. Okay, so that was a clinical diagnosis. I moved to Italy, okay, where the land of creativity, Ferraris, etc., fashion. And they said, oh, they're very creative with the human resources. So they said to me, you know about rats, that's fantastic. Why don't you teach English? Okay, so that's how I started. I did my MA in education, like Yolanda said. And so that's where I learned about the qualitative aspects of research. And these two are very related in my brain, okay? That rat and this young student, for me, they're the same. When we learn with our brain. So education acts on the brain. So if you are teaching teachers, you are teaching students, or teaching anybody, actually, you are changing their brain. Okay, so what we're doing now here. So when I see a classroom of that, I see this. Okay, that's how I see it. Okay, so that's how I see you. Now, okay, so now let's look at your plates again, see if anything's happened since. Okay. Okay. Okay then. Okay. Do you see which one happened faster? Yeah, okay. Have a seat, everybody. Have a seat. Let's sit back down. Have a seat, everybody. Okay. Okay. Thank you for your collaboration. Okay, excellent. Okay, great. So first the color went away, right? And then the last thing you see is the brown chocolate. That's what you're eating when you eat an M&M, okay? So now let me start here. So in 2000, at the local high school, they said to me, why don't you know English, you know biology, come and do CLIL. That's 2000. And there were 3 problems. The first problem was, what's CLIL? Okay, that was in 2000. And then problem 2 was, why are the students so bored? Because I knew that motivation is already in the brain. Okay, it's already in the brain. Motivation exists, I know, the rats, and we're very similar to rats. Okay, so, and also, Frank Smith, the brain of a child is superbly efficient and an instinctive learning device. So much part of any normal living creature that it functions automatically. The task of education is not to create or even develop the ability to learn. It is to understand and respect a brain's nature, and therefore facilitate its operation. And that's how it is. A brain that does not learn did not evolve to survive to today. Okay? So our brain was designed to learn. Problem number 3, there were 3 problems. Students could not use English, or even Italian for that matter, okay, to fluently communicate complex ideas in age-appropriate ways. when you leave high school, you should speak in a certain way, okay? And that was what I thought was age-appropriate, productive literacy, okay? Foreign language, L1, any language, and that would be academic discipline-specific language. If you're studying science, you have to have that kind of language. What does this mean? Here is our young student, Pedro, okay? Now, after learning English for 10 years, how good should Pedro's English be after 10 years of learning English? Good enough to find a good English restaurant. They don't exist. Number two, B, good enough to watch an English movie, good enough to find a good job, or good enough to run the country? Well, I think good enough to find a good job is fine, okay? Okay, so below are definitions of language needed to find a good job. Which definition do you like? Read it and talk to each other about which one you like. Go ahead. Okay, talk to each other, see which one you prefer. Talk to each other. Okay, great. Fabulous. How many of you preferred A as a definition? How many preferred B as a definition? It doesn't really matter which one you prefer. What's important is I got the message across. This is a strategy. I give you the BICS, I give you the CALB, I give you the informal language, I give you formal language, I give you the message I want to give you. It doesn't matter which one you like, okay? You've gotten the message. Here, down here, it's just a little more discipline specific, okay? So, now, school leavers must be able to, when they wish, sound intelligent. That's just a heuristic for saying all that, blah, 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 blah. Sound intelligent, okay? And this is what 15-year-old students tell us. We just want to sound intelligent, okay? So, be it in L1 or in English. And that's what we're talking about, okay? Now, when they want, okay? So the suggestion is to think literacy rather than language. Because when we think about language, we think about grammar, vocabulary, focus on form, that kind of stuff, okay? Literacy is communicating complex ideas. Because the problem is with content teachers, we're not interested in language, focus on form, that kind of stuff. We don't care. That's not my business. But if you tell me about communicating scientific notions, I'm interested. Because that is my business. Okay? So, voila, photo, Anna. Anyways, so here is a project that we are involved in with Anna as a co-chair, and it's CLIL Acronym. So look it up if you are interested. That is what the project is focusing on. It's on understanding disciplinary discourse and academic language literacies. Okay? Now, back here, motivation already exists in the brain. So my question was, can CLIL harness this existing system for teaching content and also for building students' age-appropriate literacies, sound intelligent for their age? Okay, that was in 2003, and like Yolanda said, those received the Eltons, and in 2022 we submitted a second set of materials, and those were together with they were finalists together with BBC and National Geographic. None of us three won, but it's okay. So, and actually there's some copies of the books around, so if you want to take a look. So here we are. Literacy is to communicate complex ideas. So my question was, what we just did here, can students learn complex English if instead of teaching English to them, we focus on building chemistry literacy? And would this be worth our time as content and language experts? Okay, that's the question, right? If there's too much chemistry, language people are not interested. If there's too much language, content people are not interested. So there was a 2011, there was a CLIL science project for 12-year-olds after school. 18 hours over 6 weeks in rural Calabria. And there were 2 types of experiments we did, an ink experiment and an M&M experiment, which you just did one part of one M&M experiment. And the literacy that we're interested in was to develop their ability to read equations in maths and chemistry, and write lab reports, observations versus explanation, because an observation is not the same as an explanation. Okay, so that's very important to distinguish. So, and this has been published, so I'll be sending Yolanda the publications. Now, before we start, let's look at the starting point of our learners. Let's see where they were starting. Here was an entrance test. Okay, an entrance test. There are these 4 images. Here's a guy with weights, and here's a dog in a box, and here's somebody's room with so many bags, books, etc. And here's the size and features of a McDonald's Big Mac. Okay, and the questions here were things like, what do you do before you go to bed at night? It just had to write something like that. Yeah, it was a very general English answer. The only thing that this student answered, this was my entry-level CLIL, okay? So I was a little worried. But anyways, so how many bags does Gina have? Here's Gina's room. He wrote the number 3, but Arabic number, not even the word 3, okay? And here, what do you usually pour, water or pizza? Because I need them to do the word pour, because we had to do pouring water. And he wrote, I usually water. So this was a starting point. This is what we had to start with. So it was a little, so the number of words in these as you can see, very simple questions, general English questions. This student 12 was the lowest. You saw 2 words. This student number 1, she wrote this. Oh, quite a lot of words. This purple line is the minimum words to answer those questions about, okay? So I asked 2 or 3 mother tongue speakers, answer these questions in the minimum number of words you can. And the minimum number of words is about 62. So that was a cutoff to answer just so stupid questions, okay? So that was a starting point. So the question was, can we teach them chemistry and increase their language? Okay, so designing CLIL tasks with the objective of building students' age-appropriate discipline-specific literacy. And here is the material. Don't look at it yet. Wait. Okay. So shall we CLIL? Now you've already done part of the experiment. So what I'd like, because of the room situation, I wanted to do that first before we do this. Okay? So usually I would tell you now do it, but there was a room situation would have been difficult. Let me just walk you through these materials. These are in your handout, in your folder, this material here. Okay. Okay, so now I'm not gonna, of course, we're not gonna do this, okay? Let's just walk through how it looks, okay? Well, I'm gonna have you do another thing. But this first page, okay, I'm just going to walk you through it. Look at this. The first activity was to tell the students to choose between how many, how much, simple word choices, okay, grammar, very simple grammar, to decide how to set up the experiment. Okay, so they were just figuring out how to set up the experiment. Okay, and so once they decide in task 1A which words they should be choosing, okay, to make the correct question grammatically, then in task 1B were the answers, okay, to those questions. So for example, okay, something's coming. So for example, okay, number 1, how many M&Ms do we need? Okay, because Italians have problems with how many and how much in English, probably Spanish the same. Okay, so how many M&Ms do we need? So C, just 2 are enough. Okay, so the students will be doing this. Okay, task 1A. They would be going through this. They would be talking to each other. How much, how many? Number 2, how much sugar will we be using? And then somewhere along that, E, a lot. Okay, about 200 grams. Okay, so they would be doing this. And then task 2, look at task 2. Now tell your teacher how to do the experiment. So they tell me how to do the experiment. okay? So they tell me, so we have to shake, put the sugar in the bottle, shake it up, et cetera, shakerarlo, okay? Shake it up, pour it in the plates, et cetera, and then put the M&Ms in, okay? And you saw the M&M experiments. So now, task 3. This is for 12-year-olds. Remember how little they wrote? But this was for them. 12-year-olds. Imagine we did the experiment yesterday. Simple past. We want the simple past to come out, okay? So imagine we did the experiment yesterday. Below, there are 10 sentences about your observation from yesterday. Each sentence contains a grammatical mistake, which is underlined, because we want to make it easy, okay? Work together to correct the mistakes, okay? So why don't you do those really quickly, okay? As if you were 12 years old. Work together, okay? I want you to experience the sensation, okay? Because then I'm going to have you do something else, okay? So work together very quickly as if you're 12 and make the corrections, okay? Very quickly, work together so you can experience it, because I'll be explaining the neuroscience later, okay? So very quickly. Huh? Yes. Yes, task 3. Go ahead. Okay, work together because it's more interesting. Yeah, there's a orphan person behind you. Okay, are you working together? Because then later you have to do more. So try and, yeah. Because otherwise we waste time. Yeah, done? No, we're doing this one here. No, this one. Second page. Second page. Mm-hmm. If you don't do it, you won't understand, okay, what's happening. Done it? Very good. Okay. Okay. Now let's correct this together. Okay, for those of you who haven't done them all, just let's do it together now, okay? Don't worry, okay? But we have to do it to understand how it processes, because if we're talking about learning, you have to experience it yourself. Otherwise, you won't understand what we're analyzing, okay? So number 1, the solution contains 40 spoons of sugar, okay? You're 12, you can do that. Number 2, in this solution, the water did not contain sugar. Number 3, the colorant dissolved immediately, okay? Number 4, the colorant didn't dissolve immediately. Number 5, the water molecules were free, right? Okay, you just did the simple past in English, so you should know this. Number 6, the water molecules were not free. Okay, is that right? Then number 7, the water molecules were already occupied by sugar. The free water molecules dissolved the colorant immediately. Number 8. Number 9, the colorant dissolved quickly because the water molecules were free. And number 10, the colorant dissolved slowly because most water molecules were already bound to sugar molecules. Okay. Now you were 12. We just corrected this. Now I want you to do exercise 4. Below are 2 experimental conditions. Work together. Please do this because we're going to analyze the process later. Work together to decide which condition each of your corrected sentences in task 3 refers to. There are 2, normal water and sugar water. Remember what you saw just here? I want you to put in the sentences in normal water and sugar water. Very quickly, work together and do this together. Talk to each other. Now, if you write it, you're 12, so you need to write it out instead of just putting the numbers. If you only put the numbers, okay. The one in the back was that was normal water, normal. The one in the front was sugar. Remember here, the one in the front was sugar, the one in the back was normal, okay? The plate in the front was sugar, the one plate in the back was normal water. Okay? Okay. Now, I'd like you to, I see that most of you being teachers have only written the numbers, okay? The students have to write it, okay? So I want you to write out number 9 and number 10 in full in the spaces. Just 9 and 10, just write it out in full, okay? In the spaces. Okay, but write it out, yes, perfect. Write it out in full, okay? Now write it out in full, the sentences, 9 and 10. Write them out in full, in the proper spaces. And there's a reason for that. Yeah, for now.
So why is number 5 grammatically incorrect?
The water molecules were, because it's yesterday. Because yesterday was.
Is this correct? Is this correct?
Yeah, this is correct for today. In
Okay.
general. I read general, in red in general.
Yeah,
But,
so
yeah.
the prompt is
Because
telling you about.
yesterday, yeah, imagine we did the experiment yesterday. That's why we said
I know.
Because otherwise it would be
Yeah.
chemically correct if you talk about
If
this
it
generally.
says each sentence contains a grammatical mistake,
Mhm.
that can also be
Mhm.
easily interpreted as correct.
Not if it's yesterday. Because that's what it says.
Okay.
Imagine we did the experiment yesterday. Okay, people. Now, okay, have you written into the full sentence into number 9? What was it? Where did number 9 go? Normal water or sugar water? Okay, very good. So normal water, you're amazing. Okay, so normal water. The colorant dissolved quickly in normal water because the water molecules were free. You wrote that, right? Then in number 10, you wrote it into sugar water. The colorant dissolved slowly because most water molecules were already bound to sugar molecules. Now listen carefully. Now we're back to teachers. We're 26-year-old teachers. We're no longer 16-year-old students, okay? So in the process of writing it out, we are engaging the process called haptics, H-A-P-T-I-C-S, haptics, okay, haptics. To be able to write the word in number 10, bound to sugar molecules, you are engaging in fine motor movement that goes into your motor cortex, sensory cortex, motor cortex coordination to be able to write bound to sugar molecules. Okay? That is why you have to write. This is the best technology. It's called PP technology, pen and paper. Okay? Pen and paper. Because without pen and paper, you cannot do this haptics stuff. And since they are learning through a foreign language, the excuse is you have to learn how to write molecules, so you write it. And that's why the students have to write it out. Okay? Yes?
We just had the information about dyslexia. And would that work with dyslexic students too?
We found that with the students, of course it depends on the level of dyslexia, okay? But the students who, I'm going to show you some results from students, okay? So let me just continue. Now, so did you understand the haptics? That's why it's important. That's why there's all this space. Not for you to write ABC, 9, 1, 2, 3. You're 16. You already know how to write 1, 2, 3. Okay? You need to write water molecules. Okay? So let's look. So that is one thing. Now, very quickly, let me just show you what we did, just in case we run out of time. Task 1A. What were the students doing? In task 1A, they're using very familiar, stupid grammar that they already know very well, very easily. And they are setting up the experiment. So usually we tell the students, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and one student hears you, everybody else doesn't hear you. Okay? But here, everybody is involved in setting up the experiment. Nobody escapes because everybody has to do this task, even the students with disabilities, and I'll show you the results. So, 1. 2, we are giving them ownership of the experiment. They're telling the teacher what to do, which is usually not the case. Okay? So we are giving them ownership of the learning situation. So we are reducing the affective barrier, in other words. Okay? Number 3, look at task number 3. Task number 3, where was your focus? Was it on the language or on the content? What did you have to do it? You were just basically correcting stupid, simple past mistakes, plural S, etc. That was your focus. Your cognitive focus was on correcting dumb English mistakes, grammar. But implicitly, you were learning something about chemistry. Water molecules, sugar occupied, water not occupied, sugar free, etc. Justo? Okay? So you were kind of getting the implicit learning. Now, then when you had to transfer and write, there you are totally engaged in the content because you're writing it out, the content. So when you wrote out here, number 10, in the solution of sugar water, the colorant dissolved slowly because most water molecules were already bound by the sugar molecules. You had to consciously put that here and write it out. It's a totally different process than listening to a teacher explaining. Okay? So that was what was happening here. So first, implicit learning. Implicit learning is so valuable. We should use it as much as we can, implicit learning, okay? And that's what's happening here, the implicit learning of content in task 3 and explicit focus on the content in task 4, okay? Now, so let's now move on. Did it work? Can students learn complex English if instead of teaching English language, we focus on building chemistry literacy and use English to do it? Okay, because this would be fine for chemistry teachers in L1. Okay, here's what that student wrote after that lesson. Okay, this was like, remember, 6 lessons. Not about this, ink, etc. It was just one lesson. Okay, now let's analyze what they wrote. Now, remember they did 2 experiments, ink experiment. Okay, why don't you read that and see what you think of their English? Much better than Gina has 3 bags, okay? I mean, this is what the student wrote, okay? We just gave this kind of input for the ink experiment. Voila. That was what they wrote after 6 lessons. 6 CLIL lessons about various things, and this is 1 lesson with this, okay? So then, this is what they wrote about, that student wrote about M&Ms. Yeah, there's some mistakes in grammar, but I mean, that's all they had as input. This is all they had as input, okay? And they produced that, okay? So then that student produced this drawing. So here they have sugar water holding hands, okay? And so, yeah, this was good, okay? So now, let's look. What we did was, remember that line? That's how little they produce. So then we did a calculation of the ratio between number of words produced and the number of words in the questions, okay? Just so we can normalize across pre and post. And here it is, okay? So there was significant increase in the ability for them to use English to say something, okay? Interesting about chemistry, which is not the easiest thing in the world, okay? So, I mean, everybody increased. So, this is 15 hours of literacy focus and literacy building CLIL tasks. That's what these tasks are. They're just literacy. They're focused on building the literacy. Whole language, whole thinking, not single words. Did you see any vocabulary pre-teaching? There was no vocabulary teaching. How did it work? This is the American, this is where I took the activity from, the American Chemical Society. They have students do all these experiments, blah, 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 and then at the end they say to the teacher, ask the students what happened. I mean, when you're 12, 16, how do you know what happened? Is a 16-year-old going to say, the water molecules were free and the water molecules was attached to sugar molecules? No, they're not going to say that. They're not going to have that language. It doesn't come naturally because academic language is no one's mother tongue. Nobody speaks like that at home. No mother speaks to their child in that way. Drink your water molecules. Okay, so it's not a normal way of languaging. So even academic language, chemistry, physics, that's a foreign language. So that's why foreign language teachers have the ability to really help content teachers teach content better, because content teachers don't know how to help their students acquire that language. This is totally not our thing, okay? But we need it. We all agree we need our students to know how to sound intelligent about chemistry, physics, history, etc. So the original American Chemical Society task, you have students doing all these things, and then at the end, they say to teachers, now explain the solution. It's like, you have the students move around so much, and then at the end, you explain? I mean, what's the purpose? Here, the teacher's explaining through the tasks. This is my explanation. Okay, I don't need to stand here and blah, blah, blah. I'm explaining. And I'm explaining to every single student. Okay, dyslexic or not dyslexic. Okay, every single student's getting the same explanation. Now, Of course, with CLIL at secondary and also EMI, because I also deal with EMI professors at the university, we're dealing with unknown content and a foreign language. So the teachers who have a heart, they say, maybe the students don't have the linguistic resources to understand me when I just blah, 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 explain. Okay? So I need to find different ways to help them understand. And therefore, since I'm killing myself to teach chemistry through a foreign language, what discourse do I expect these 12-year-olds to produce to show me they have understood the concepts? Because if I'm going to kill myself doing this, at least they should be able to explain themselves in English at the level I want them to explain. Otherwise, I do it in Italian, right? Okay? So why bother? Okay, that's why we bother. So thinking literacy rather than thinking language. Start with the final literacy objective. Go to page 4 of your photocopies. Page 4 of your photocopies. And, page 3. Just page 3 very quickly. Page 3. This was I'm just going to show you the task. Page 3, 5A, was a task where the students, after you just did put it right in the box, they had to then put in order these sentences, okay? And for example, number 4 was in E. In the normal water, the M&M dissolved rapidly, but in the sugar water, the M&M dissolved slowly. So that was sentence number 4 in the sequence. So they had to read through this sequence and figure out which one was sentence 1, sentence 2. And what I did was I put in anaphoric referencing in the sentence structures. So they had to, of course, based on their observation, based on the experiment they just did, and based on the language clues, okay, they were able to put together the final paragraph, okay? Now, what's more important, though, is task 5B. Look at task 5B. How did you know the order of the sentences? Answer these questions. Which single word helps you see that sentence G comes after sentence D? So sentence D is, first we made some sugar water by dissolving a very high amount of sugar in water. That was sentence number 1, D. But sentence G comes after that. We then poured the sugar water into a plate and poured normal water into another plate. So which words helped you understand that G comes after D? Okay, so they had to analyze it language-wise. They were doing the language analysis. But they had to tell us which words helped them discuss. And they talked to each other, blah, 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 blah. So they are talking about the language of the discourse, because this is a whole discourse, not single words, not sentence phrases, not sentence stems, whole discourse. And so they worked through this, okay? So this was what the students worked through. Then, let's now go to page 4. A, page 4A, that is a final paragraph that the students then constructed from the previous page. So this is actually the answer to task 5A, okay? So the first task here. So the first, we made some sugar water, blah, 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 okay? Is that clear? Okay? So this is the answer to the previous exercise. Now, let's go. So that is where I wanted them to get to. That is the kind of discourse we want them to produce about the dissolution, the chemistry concept of dissolution. This is what they have to understand, okay? So we started with that, and then we developed the materials. So that was a learning objective. The literacy objective, we start with that, and then you work on the materials. So now, here, B, general science literacy, okay? Now look at where the 2 asterisks are in the middle of that paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, 2 asterisks. That is where we separate observation from explanation, okay? The first sentences, the sentences before the asterisks are observations. The sentences after the asterisks are explanation of the observation. Often when we take students to museums, take students on field trips, take them to theater, take them anywhere, do an experiment, do whatever. We say, so what did you understand? They understand nothing, of course, because nobody's given them any support to understand anything. But what they report are observations. But that's not an explanation. It's what you observed, not what you understand. So here is a distinction between observation and explanation of the observations. Now, then, that is age-appropriate productive literacy. In the foreign language, because chemistry, the language of chemistry is like a foreign language. Okay? So we take a challenging text. This was text. This was a final text. We transformed it into tasks. And therefore, as the students work on tasks, the output is academic text. And that's what we're looking for. So CLIL explicitly cultivates students' ability to use foreign language academically and in discipline-appropriate ways. You saw the results, okay? So the type of foreign language they need to get a job that Pedro needs to find a good job, okay? So otherwise, why bother? Why do we bother? If they, at the end of the day, cannot use that English to do something job necessary, why do we bother, okay? So the input are tasks, the output is academic text. Now, so very quickly, as the students are working through this, okay, what they're doing, they are solving down there in green, they're solving challenging but solvable problems, like doing Sudoku or crossword puzzles, okay? Because that's what this is. Look at the first one is so dumb. It's just stupid grammar, okay? It's a stupid solvable problem. How many of you do Sudokus or crossword puzzles? Okay, look at these people that have nothing better to do in their lives. They have so much time. They do. Why? We have no time to do anything, and we do Sudokus, okay? Because it's a pleasure. It activates a motivational pathway of the brain. When you find a solution, it activates so these are stupid little solvable problems, okay? And a problem-solving state, when you're in a problem-solving state, even those microseconds of you talking together about which sentence goes where, you're trying to solve a solvable problem. A problem-solving state may activate the reticulonorepinephrine system, which doesn't matter, that goes all over the brain, and it activates a primitive attentional behavior. And this is linked with Csikszentmihalyi, okay, the Hungarian psychologist who talked about the state of flow in consciousness. And we enter flow when we're concentrating doing something. We hope a surgeon enters flow, okay? When children play the internet. When we give our students stupid little tasks that they have to talk to each other and solve, we see that. When students are engaged, they're in that state of flow. But we don't need to be in a state of flow for days. We just need to be in a state of flow for a few minutes, okay? And so, are these really interesting? Were students really interested in the M&Ms? No, it's actually not very interesting, okay? But when you have stupid little things that you can solve, you start solving them, okay? So you bring them in. And, for example, here, page number 3. When students have to reread these sentences zillions of times to put them in order, what are we doing? We're teaching them. We're making sure they are really understanding what is happening with the content through English, okay? Now, simple solvable problems. When you are solving a solvable problem, your pupils dilate, whether you like it or not. You cannot control your pupillary dilation. Your pupils dilate, okay? And that's because of the norepinephrine is linked. And then when you find the solution, it's the aha moment, right? Okay? And when you find the aha moment, your pupils then constrict. However, if the problem is perceived to be totally unresolvable from the start, your pupils just constrict. No dilation possible. So that's what these tasks were doing. They were just putting students in a very interesting, a very motivational state of solving stupid solvable problems and talking to each other. Because as you are doing this, you have to talk to each other. You have to say things like, bound to sugar molecules. Here they're bound to sugar molecules. Here they're not bound to sugar. Here you have to use the language. You have to use the language to be able to do this. Okay? So, learning and problem solving may activate primitive pleasure pathways. And that's really important. Okay? But we don't need to do God knows what kind of tasks. These are dumb. Okay? These are not earth-shattering tasks. And that's part of the medial forebrain bundle, which is the brain reward system in the human brain. Now, let's see. Here, what else? Okay. Explicit pre-teaching, there was no explicit pre-teaching of any technical vocabulary. Implicit assimilation of technical words that were within context. So water molecules. How can you teach water molecules without explaining the content, okay? So you don't have to do any pre-teaching. We didn't give any sentence stems. There were no sentence stems, okay? And the students were able to produce their own discourse about it. Okay. So, again, think literacy rather than language. And, okay, I'm going to kind of start concluding here. So we're talking about content and language, even in L1, okay? So how do I design this instruction? Well, of course, you know Bix and Calp, okay? You look like it's ad nauseum. Okay, Bix and Calp, you know. And then, of course, you have Vygotsky, spontaneous knowledge and scientific knowledge. Let's take those two. Like, for example, in Vygotsky, schooling up there is for cultivating complex thinking. That's what he valued schooling for. Okay, we know him as ZPD and all that, but he valued schooling as a place for cultivating complex thinking that you wouldn't otherwise learn in everyday life. For example, when you're young, you talk about food and nutrition, you talk about vegetables and things you can see. When you're 16 and 17, when you talk about nutrition, you'd be talking about fatty acids and carbohydrates. Okay, rightly so. Okay, so if you take those two and you cross them, you have content and you have the language. The concepts are spontaneous. Vygotsky's spontaneous knowledge. The sun rises and the sun sets, not scientific. Over here, scientific knowledge. Every 24 hours, the Earth rotates around its axis. That's sunrise and sunset in scientific terms, okay? And then you have the Bix and Calp. So what you have then is these 4 quadrants. That was a challenging text, this text in the last page, right? That's a challenging text. If you take that challenging text and give it to the students, because that's what we want to give them, but if we give them just that, what we have is we break the balance. That little red dot is working memory. Working memory is limited in capacity, in duration, etc. So when you give them both the complex content and the complex language all at once, you break working memory. You break the balance. So you have working memory overload. But what we need to do is get to what the students were able to produce. It has to become familiar. So what we have is content and language have to become familiar. Even when 2 chemists speak to each other about this, for them, they're in quadrant D. They should be speaking about chemistry in that way. The language of chemistry should be natural and easy for chemists. We expect chemists to speak like that. So they are working quadrant D. We're in the classroom, we start with quadrant A, and we want to move to quadrant D. Okay? The problem is moving to quadrant D, because at the end, they have to be able to produce that. So where content is small, it doesn't overload working memory, and language is small, it doesn't overload working memory, even though it's an academic language about chemistry. Okay? So what we need to do is meander between the other quadrants. So here, in the lower right, content is new and complex. So language must be very light. So that is what exercise 1 was. Look at that. Language was very light, dumb grammar. Then you have this more dumb grammar, okay, on exercise task 3. Then, once they've gotten the concepts, they understand the concepts, the content, then you start working on the language. Because concept C becomes very light, it doesn't do anything to working memory, and then you can start using the context for building academic language. And that's what task 5A is, and task 5B. That's a language analysis, okay? And that's working on language. L become, and then you end up in quadrant D, where both content and language are familiar. And then you move on, okay? So voila. We've already analyzed this. So here, let's stop here. Final thing I wanted to address the learning disability student. The last phrase on the bottom, C, that's long-term literacy objective for 18-year-olds, okay? In a saturated solution containing very high concentrations, of a solute, e.g. sugar, there are few free solvent molecules, e.g. water molecules. That's the kind of discourse we want an 18-year-old to have, okay? So I'm going to show you some results from a student who has a sostegno teacher, a support teacher in the classroom. Because in Italy, we're very good with inclusive education. So this student had a support teacher, and not this one, but here. What this shows is the following, okay? Now, what they had to do, don't look at it, it's going to be confusing, don't look at it. What they had to do was bring color pencils and color in the sentences that were here, that were about materials and methods. So, okay, I tell you what we used and what we did, and they were supposed to highlight it in red. But instead, the student didn't have his color pencils because he's not used to being able to learn anything in class. So what he did was he used a line. Then he used a circle to say, I report what we observed. He used a circle. So here he is making an effort to show that he can do this. And when I walked into the classroom with the materials in English, the support teacher was immediately like, oh my gosh, we had to take him out of the classroom. I said, no, keep him in, and let's see what he can do. And he produced this, okay? So anyway, at that point, these are cognitive discourse functions, and this is the last slide. Have you ever wondered what those boxes were? Yeah, right. What are those boxes? I've always wondered. Instruction which explicitly builds academic literacy. That's a concrete thing we can do. That's a concrete set of boxes. So academic language is no one's mother tongue. At the interface, and disability literacies is at the interface. If you look at figure 1 of my abstract, it's a step towards inclusive education. So voila. So, and therefore, enjoy designing for those brains. Okay, thank you. Okay.
So we only have time for a very quick question. If somebody would like to ask a question or comment. Yeah, okay, Anna, okay. Is there?
Thank you, Mr. Numela, for the University of the Basque Country. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Thank you so much. I'm given about your haptics description. My question would be, do you expect that they perform as well in oral skills as in written skills, like these these productions that you have shown of the students writing? Could we expect this in their oral skills?
In what skills? Oral?
Oral, in their speaking skills. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Very good question. We also have them present things to the families, etc. So, yes, they were doing fine with the oral. Because, you know, if you can write that well, you can speak. And what was interesting was there was at the same time there was a group doing only English after school, and then this group of CLIL Science after school. And when they went to do their exams, the Cambridge exams for flyers, movers, I don't know, etc., the examiners, they said, this group of students is different. Because if I can talk to you about water molecules, I can talk to you about my mom, my dog, my house. I mean, that's okay. Okay? So the students who did only general English after school, they were not as confident as the students who were able to talk about water molecules, sugar molecules in English. So yes, I would say yes.
Anna,
Would you like to say something? Yeah, well, very quickly.
Thank you, Teresa. Very, very interesting. I was wondering, the last quadrant that you showed, and then the last stage was this, no complex language, no complex content, but wouldn't be the last stage also what you showed here, for them to be able to produce complex text with a language that is required? So I was wondering what the last quadrant should be, because this unpacking that you showed, which was really excellent, the different stages, that then lead them to produce the text that was expected by the teachers, in the classroom, a kind of academic context. But then you showed, I was really interested in showing that this is another final sort of aim, which is this everyday, less academic talk that people use when they work, at work, right? It's not anymore this academic text, but if they're working at a company. So I was wondering whether the final product is both, right? High academic, high language, plus low academic.
I totally agree. And actually, I remember actually when you and Rachel, you gave us an example of, and Anna's question is perfectly right. You teach them the high academic CALP, and they still need in some situations, they need to be able to speak everyday language. Now, the problem was, okay, first we wanted to make sure the high academic CALP about chemistry was achievable through just one set of tasks. But then you're right, because at the end of the day, they have to also be able to bring it down. So the next thing was when they did the final presentation with their families, they were able to explain it to their aunts, okay? So you had to explain it to your aunt who's 70 years old. Okay, so that was the target for oral presentation. So yeah, and the drawing, you could see that they got the idea. Yeah, definitely. You have to finalize with informal so that you can test to see if they really got it. And I learned that from you.
Well, thank you very much.